Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to part two, talking about the Electoral College in this edition of AP Government in the Time of Corona. Last class period, we talked about influences of the founders and the original plan. Today, we're going to have to talk about why do we not have the original plan. But before we do that, we have a few more ideas to explain about why the founders picked the system that they picked. Remember, the Electoral College is an odd and unique system in the world. In other words, there's no other country to my knowledge, although I'm just a government teacher in Frenchtown, but there's no other country to my knowledge that uses such a system. In fact, when the United States itself tries to export democracy and advises democracies on how to go about their business, I do not believe they have ever recommended the Electoral College. So why would we have this system that no other country uses? So we're not quite there. Finishing that idea off before we can talk about, well, how has it changed over time? So one of the ideas we need to discuss about thinking about how it's changed over time, or rather why the founders picked the system they did, is, well, why didn't they pick one of the other alternatives? So last video, I talked about all these different issues that the founders had to worry about, that they were worried about, things like, oh my goodness, the sovereignty of states, and whether or not, tyranny of the majority was being protected against. Well, a couple other problems to think about before we're ready to move on. Why didn't the founders just pick one of the more obvious solutions? So, for example, a lot of people would just say, well, let's just elect the president by casting votes. Everybody just cast votes, and whoever's got the most wins. Well, beyond that not satisfying some of the problems that we discussed in the last video, there's some issues with just a straight popular vote. At least there were in 1789. Now understand that today a lot of these issues are no longer issues, and that right there is where maybe some people suggest it's time for us to look at scrapping the Electoral College. Before we get too deep into that and I get all kinds of hate mail, remember that many of the problems that would come about with this question, not just why don't we just let people decide, even if they're solved, it wouldn't fix some of the concerns the founders had that I addressed in the last video. So before, just remember that. So, but why wouldn't the founders just let the people decide? Well, there's that too much democracy thing. We talked about the difference between democracy and mob rule at sometimes is just a matter of perspective. And, our entire government is this balancing act between, we want to have popular sovereignty, we want to have democracy, but at the same time, we're worried about, what happens when the majority can use the power of the vote to destroy the minority. And so, obviously, a straight popular vote would tip that scale quite a bit in favor of democracy and tyranny of the majority. There is also the information level. People used to talk about education level, things like that. But the information level, to what degree did the average American in 1790 really know about the kinds of issues that a president would have to deal with? The average American knows a lot about, life on the frontier and about their profession, maybe, their growing crops in Pennsylvania, but they don't know much about, say, trade treaties with France. The newspapers, there was a robust newspaper industry in the big cities, but not so much out on the frontier where quite a few people lived. And if you can't find out information, then what are you basing your decision on when it comes time to vote? And on top of that, okay, you got candidate A and candidate B, and you got to decide between the two. But you live out in Ohio, or even the frontiers of New York, and if the candidate never comes out to see you, and there's not really much newspaper traffic, how are you even going to make that choice? Technology level, of course, we have issues with conducting a national election. How's that going to look when everything kind of goes on the speed of a boat or a horse at that time? So there's some technology problems. We do go back to this notion that the small states were worried about what would happen if everybody just votes. That would definitely give the big states where most of the people live a leg up on things, and tyranny of the majority again. Worried about what happens when the majority gets in charge. And finally, the founders were worried that a national election where everybody got to vote and their vote counted directly to the president might split the country. I voted for you and he voted for him, and now we're on different sides, and that's not something the founders wanted to happen. And maybe today we're seeing a little bit about why. The other option is, okay, well, can't let the people decide. Well, let's just let Congress decide. I mean, think about it. Congress satisfies quite a few of the concerns that the founders had that caused them to form the Electoral College. Here you have a group of elites. Here you have people who are represented. The big state, small state thing has been solved. The technology issue is not a problem. The information issue is not a problem. So here you've got a body of people that seems ready-made. Why don't you just let them pick the president? Well, the issue is, separation of powers, really. The president would kind of owe his job to the Congress, and that would give the Congress way too much power over the president, kind of turn the president into almost a employee of Congress, if you will. It's like, hey, we picked you, we can get rid of you if we want. And that seems to be a violation of both of checks and balances and of the concept of co-equal branches, where the president and Congress have the same amount of power. So I just wanted to make sure we kind of eliminated some of the more commonly discussed alternatives. So to go back a little bit, we've got a system that respects the states as states. We have a system that protects against the tyranny of the majority, but yet then allows for the majority to have a say. We gave popular sovereignty. We made sure that those who have a stake in the government, if something to lose, are the ones who are making the choice. And so the system is created really because of a unique set of problems that the founders are trying to solve. Now, last video, we talked about how that was going to work. Talked about how we elect our electors based on personality and personal trust, rather than on knowing who they were going to vote for. That each elector has 2 votes, and so that was the system the founders created. So remember this. Many states, same system as the legislative branch. Electors are chosen personally. Everybody gets 2 votes. The top vote getter becomes president. The next one becomes vice. And Kanye, everybody's a winner. So the question is, what happened? Well, to be honest with you, what happened was the rise of political parties. Remember, parties are starting to form even in George Washington's presidency. George Washington himself might be called a Federalist. But regardless of George Washington, definitely the people within his cabinet are beginning to coalesce around 2 different concepts of government. And those concepts of government are going to eventually be given labels that are going to become labeled, organized political parties. Well, how is that going to change things? Well, first off, we have ourselves the election of 1800, which you hopefully read about in your text. You remember the election of 1800 because of the 2 votes per person, where every elector gets 2 votes, and because there was a dominant political party, so everybody in that party, all the electors who are members of that party, they had the majority, and they cast votes basically for the 2 top guys in their party. And what that did was create a tie, right? Who's going to be president? Everybody's voting for the same 2 people. And so this election of 1800 goes to an embarrassing 36 votes or something like that in the House of Representatives. Basically, America, in one of its very first elections, is having a very difficult time doing the very basic job of picking a president. Well, we can't have that, and so the first change to the Electoral College is the 12th Amendment. Every elector still gets 2 votes. And by the way, this is still what happens today. every elector gets 2 votes, but now those electors choose 1 to be vice, 1 to be president. So hopefully, while there is still a possibility if all the numbers were to work out for a tie or that nobody gets a majority, that chance is greatly reduced because we're not splitting, the majority is not splitting its votes equally between 2 top candidates. Specifically, though, what happened that's the most important to changing things is the rise of parties itself. The fact that now I'm a member of a party and you're a member of a party, and if I vote for you to be my elector, and because you're a member of the same party, I know who you're going to vote for president, basically means that now I can pick you or somebody else based on who I know you're going to pick as president. So before, we had a situation where I picked you because I trusted your vote. I don't know who you're going to pick, but I trust who you're going to pick. Now I've got a system where I'm picking you because I know you're going to vote for Biden. And you're going to vote for Trump. And therefore, because I know you're going to vote for the Democrat, and the Democrat's candidate is Biden, that means I can pick you based on who you're going to vote for. And that means really that I'm picking the president. I'm picking Biden or Trump. Now, I'm picking still you or you to be my elector, but now that I know who you're going to vote for, I'm deciding who to vote for based on who you're going to vote for, which basically means now I'm picking the president, not the elector. And you're the elector, just kind of a middleman. So the rise of political parties really changes things. It makes things a lot more democratic, and it makes things, it really gives more more power to the will of the people. So that changed quite a bit. So here's how it's supposed to work. In November, everybody votes state by state. This respects each state as a state. So here in Montana, we voted in this election for Mitt Romney, 55%, over Barack Obama, 41%, and every state in the United States is going to do this. Once every state has, the voters of that state have basically given their opinion of who they want in that state, then we're going to convert that to electoral votes. We're going to assign electoral votes. Now, it's winner take all because that state voted. So what I mean by that is Montana voted. There was an election in Montana, and Mitt Romney, in this case, won that election. Therefore, Mitt Romney wins Montana. Therefore, Mitt Romney gets all of the votes that have been given to Montana. Whoa, 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 whoa. Now, the idea that Mitt Romney gets all of Montana's votes and that every state does this by this winner-take-all method really is a function of reminding us how much the states matter as a state. Okay, so now every state does this, but now we need to still select a national president. So we're going to total up all these electoral votes that have been awarded. And of course, when you look across based on how the people of those states, where the people live, you can see which states are the most powerful by counting the number of electoral votes that you can get if you win that state. So this is a kind of a power map of the United States, if you will. See little tiny Montana here versus, say, Texas or New York or something like that. But once we add them all that matters is that you get 270 or more votes. So Barack Obama, 332, to Mitt Romney's 206, so he becomes president. In this way, every state had its say, and it had its say as a state. The people of the state also had their say. It recognizes the importance of each state. It also created a national presidency. Everything is accomplished. Next class period, next video, I'll talk about what the issues are and why some people do not like the Electoral College.